Okay, so here I am set up and ready to go. You see we got flags because I'm playing with the Fog of War rules. French have to set up first, and basically their units have to set up within 4 hexes of the German border. All the units they have that don't have some kind of little indicator, which will either be a turn that it comes in or the card that it has, are kind of free to set up there. Among them is the Imperial Guard, and they have 1 dummy unit. And basically the question comes down to, do you want to throw the guards on the line at first, where they'll stiffen the defenses a little bit. I mean, they're just a regular unit in terms of combat ability. They have nothing special there unless there's a card that does something. For the Germans, they have somewhat more restrictions. They can place anywhere in Germany, but a couple of their units start the game required to be stacked together. Interesting thoughts, at least interesting to me, that come out when I'm looking at the board, especially as I was setting up the Germans. Well, for one thing, there are fortresses in certain places. So for example here, yeah, doing this left-handed is difficult. But here, for example, there's a fortress. I know that's there. I'm allowed to look at that and see where the fortresses are. I'm just not allowed to peek at what's on the other side of that. So that means I can set up units here that need not attack. They might help in an attack. There's a probable weak spot here, but the problem with that is I can only trace 3 hexes back to my rail lines. I don't have a rail connection until I take Strasbourg, essentially, to push through the southern parts of Alsace. So I felt almost compelled to make the attack over in this general region. The question is how I exactly want to devote my attacks. For example, Metz has a fortress, so I can actually ignore it because of that and slip across the river and concentrate, say, on just Strasbourg and this lone unit out here. So that's my plan. Cards are out, and seeing the cards helps understand what this is going to be more about. Like I said, they each have their own effects in various points in the turn. So for example, you have your mobilization effect. In some cases like this one, you have a kind of nice combat effect. So maybe you don't want to use this for the mobilization because combat cards seem to be a rare. This one has a negation to German staff work, which apparently is a pretty good card. These are all hidden in your hand at the time. I've got them face up so that it's easier for me to deal with. But this has a lot of good bonuses on it. Basically, things you can do without paying. And then you've also got this historical note down there to tell you what the card represents. So far from what I see of the cards, I'm very happy with how they work, sort of. For example, the military one, the very good position. That's something that, to some extent, it makes sense that the defender, that the player has some control and maybe paying some price in terms of cards to take a position, maybe by giving up some ground or whatever that's better than they would otherwise. Here's another combat one, von Breidal's Death Ride, which, is a historical event where the Cav actually did a successful charge but got destroyed by it. I'm not going, that's essentially what this allows. It allows you to double the strength of a Cav. Well, they're only 1-point Cav, so that's +1, in exchange for losing that unit permanently. Again, maybe not something you could force to happen all the time, but it does make sense that as a combat card, it's not like, ooh, I did voodoo on the weather, and, which always disturbs me in these kind of games. We'll see if there's anything like that in here, but so far I'm not seeing that. Another thing I didn't mention, some of these cards, the setup is basically, hey, you remove certain cards and they go in the discard pile at the beginning of the game. Only way they come back is when there's a reshuffle to take place. How do reshuffles take place? Jeez, I forgot. I'm going to have to look that up, obviously. Terrain effects. River's only effective if everybody's attacking across, so these guys here can attack this fort if need be. Maybe in conjunction with a stack here. Remember, stacks are indivisible in attack, which is weird. So that, you know, you're not. I'm used to units being indivisible in most of these games, but in this case, stacks themselves are indivisible. So I have a pretty limited front to attack along, with this down here being an option that you can play around with. All right, I'm gonna take a little break before I actually start. One little piece I forgot to mention. The French have this unit, the Army of Africa. It's in the setup. I meant to mention this earlier, but then forgot it. But I didn't notice it till I started reading through the setup and following that. This piece can be placed as a reinforcement in any mobilization, French mobilization phase, including the first turn. The problem is if they do so, on the balance of power cards, they can cause a revolt in the French colonies. Now, I don't, here's one that's been removed from the deck, and that's actually specified on the card, so I don't have to worry about trying to remember that. That's just a warning of what the cost of getting that extra unit is. Alright, let's actually get this started. Now, the Germans aren't going to have operations or mobilization phases on turn 1, if I recall correctly. I tried looking that up, but I have such a hard time looking up rules, and I'm pretty certain that that's what it is. So, let's take a look at what we want to do. The Germans are going to get their move and attack. Well, I've already largely determined what I'm going to do. I can't move into this hex. One, because of these locking zones of control. So I'm kind of stuck here. Oh no, there's no zone here. But I can't move into this hex because it would mean I have to attack this unit. That may be something I want to do, but right now I want to focus on taking this unit out. So I'm going to be looking at launching an attack on this fortress and then working this unit over. I'm going to ignore Metz, and I'm going to ignore this. I'm just going to try to break through in the center. Now, that's rougher terrain and harder to move through, but that's where I see kind of the easiest route to Paris at this point, because I don't have a Luxembourg card to let me through. Now, this is where I've positioned myself with attempts to attack this unit. There's not going to be any terrain there. The river doesn't even go this far. It's only this far. Over here, an attack here. I cancel the river out by being on this side. But we're not done yet. Any units, we're in the reaction phase, any French units that aren't engaged already can move forward and add to the German difficulties. So this is just a dummy. I don't want to do that, obviously, but this one is a 2-point cav unit, which if I put up here forces these guys to attack. That looks appealing, because otherwise we're going to get an attack here. None of these fortresses are... Oh, this one I could put under siege, actually, before I go to combat. Oh no, there's no fortress there. Yes. Okay. So, that'll take some of the pressure off, perhaps, this fortress. Now, what it may mean is that the Germans concentrate on this unit and don't attack the fortress. They don't know what's in either of those hexes. So that's kind of an issue that they have to deal with. Combat is sequential, in the sense that you resolve one combat fully and thus can cut off units. So if I took Strasbourg somehow, I think that's highly unlikely, or vice versa, if I take this hex, I've got zones going through these hexes. And friendly units don't prevent zones of control from having an effect, for retreats and such not, if I recall correctly. Again, I have to look these things up as I'm going, but that's strongly my memory of it. So it looks to me like I think the best option I have for the French here is to discard a card in order to move this with a reaction. Now here we have this. It's just going to cost us a card. There's no friction point card. Is this a... I know using friction points results in... Let's see if we've got anything here. Yeah, we can't affect their reaction with friction points. See, the French have a friction point assigned against them initially, so... yeah, I think I'm going to just look and see what is my worst card. This one looks pretty yummy, to tell you the truth. But these... right... wow, they all look good. I don't like giving any of these up, to tell you the truth. But I'm going to throw the System D card away because I think this is a vital move and push myself into here. Now this puts the Germans on their combat phase. They have to declare all their battles. Now clearly they want to declare a battle between these two units and this. They don't have to attack here because again there's a fortification there. Someday I'll get skilled with using these left-handed, right? I got skilled throwing darts with either hand. The question is, do I want to launch an attack on Strasbourg? Now I know Strasbourg's defense is 2 plus a unit. I don't really have a whole lot there. So I'm going to do as I mentioned and launch all 3 of these against this unit. That's probably overwhelming force. And then here against here. At this point the French have to think whether or not they want to play this card for its defensive aspect. That could cause a lot of damage to these Germans that they caught. I think I do. But first the Germans pick one of the battles they want to fight. Now, if they win this battle, they've then cut this unit off from supply, which sounds good to me. So let's see if we have any combat cards that can help us. This is against a French fortress only. Heh. I could double a German cav to eliminate it. Permanent elimination for a doubled unit. I'm crossing the river, which is going to give them an additional strength point. The forest has nothing, except no advance. I'm not going to be allowed to advance. So, you know, I'm not going to waste the Death Ride card. Mainly, I'm not going to waste the unit from that card in this attack. I'm not sure making this attack first makes any sense, but it's what I'm going to do. So we flip over and go to the battle sequence. And with 2 cards, I don't need to flip over, but this is the experience you'd have multiplayer. At this point, any dummies would be revealed. There aren't any there. So now we total the attacking units. And there are going to be 2 strength points. I'll flip the defender over as well. I should face these so that we can see them in the proper direction. Alright, so right now I'm at -1 because of the river, basically. The defender doesn't have any attacker friction points, so he can't do anything to prevent this. There's no siege table. The attacker could play a card affecting battle. Yeah, at this point is where I'd make my choice. I could cancel out that -1 to get me to a 0. I just don't think that's worth. This is not a bad card, so I don't think that's worth throwing into play that way. So I'm not going to, but the defender may want to play this. Well, I'm not going to get cut off here anyway. I'll let the attacker attack at even there. or at -1. Compute the combat differential, so we're at -1, and we roll a die on this table, and it's largely bad for the attacker. A 4 gives me an attacker withdraws. The longer arrows, the routed. All defeated units must retreat a hex. We can do that up here. The attacker, or the winner, could advance into here. That's rough terrain. Let's see if that has any restriction. No, it doesn't. But he would pick up a friction point if he does so, and he doesn't particularly want to. So we're done there. And now we launch an attack here. Again, I don't think there are any dummies present. Oops, that's a fortress. Can't flip that over. So here I have 11. And 9 is 20. That's humongous. Against 6. I'm hitting a big French unit. Alright. Well, that's going to be on the big table. The attacker could play a card. I don't see playing a card in this case unless I had something that gave me some particular advantage, you know, maybe like a breakthrough or something. I don't know if there's anything like that. For the French, this card, they pay another friction and add 2 strength points. That's not going to help, and it slows down any retreats. I'm not terribly worried about the retreats either at this point. So I'm going to take this full on. This is not a good result, but 9, 13, 20 to 6 is 14. 2 strength points isn't going to make a bit of difference. And the attacker gets a major defeat, inflicts a major defeat. All French units are eliminated. There's a morale cost to that. The French army drops a point. If we look here, each friendly unit eliminated helps. The Germans actually increase a point for having eliminated an enemy unit. And none of these others are in play yet. Okay, those are administrative phase. And they happen when these objective, the flagged hexes, fall. Okay, let's keep looking because there's more. The victor can conduct an advance after combat for free, but it's in the forest, so the Germans are still kind of stuck there. They didn't get the advance. I wasn't paying enough attention to the terrain rules to realize how slowed I was going to be. I don't know how much effect it had on my positioning. And now we go to an administrative phase where the attacker has the, where the Germans have the choice between drawing a card for free. That would put me above my hand limit. I haven't gotten rid of any cards. Removing half of my friction points, which I see no reason not to do, even though I have no friction points, or pass, which has the same effect. Basically, is there a card that I'm not so sure I want? Because I could draw a card for free here. Manteuffel gives me a bigger reaction. I can move an entire stack. That's 2 units instead of 1. This isn't that impressive. I'm going to draw a card. March to the guns, mobilization, combat. I can pay 1 to have a stack ignore enemy zones of control for purposes of combat obligations. If it attacks at least 1, that's kind of neat ability. Or I can use it to discard for reaction movement and move any and all reserve units in a single hex, provided they enter the hexes they enter an enemy's out of control. I'm going to throw out the Death Ride. And now we'll move down to the French side of the first turn. What about the rest of the administrative phase here? I reconceal eligible units. Well, what's eligible? Oh, crap. And I'm allowed to spawn another dummy if I wish. Now I might have to take one. Yeah, I can take one out of there. Oh, what's eligible to reconceal here? Let's find the administrative phase. It's going to be under the optional rules. If you're not in an enemy zone of control, you get to flip. Okay, these guys are not in an enemy zone of control. This guy is not in an enemy zone of control. These guys are not in an enemy zone of control. And now I get to drop a dummy on the board. And I'll put it here. Okay, so now we're moving to the first full player turn, right? The French are going to get an operations phase, where they get to decide whether or not to take an R&R turn. What do we give up if we take an R&R? As far as I can see, we give up the opportunity to launch an attack by the Imperial Guard. Alright, let's see what we gain. I've already gone through this in the rules, but I've forgotten much of it. And we can't enter a zone of controls. We have to move as though retreating if we're going to move. Our mobile units that are in an enemy zone of control, which does not include our fortress units. But here's the problem. This hex is kind of important in maintaining our line right now. Our current line is not terribly strong in terms of a collapse here. So keep that in mind, that we may not want to move into that position. Our units in enemy zones of control must disengage, which means skipping all the battle steps. Taking an attacker withdraws from the battle. Now, there is a temptation to do this, because the gains for this is we don't draw cards. Instead, we can discard whatever we like and fill our hand back up. We get... Now, the question is, do we still get an administrative phase in this case? I think so. I think it's just these other phases that are affected by it. The administrative doesn't seem to be removed, which means we get an additional bonus of removing another half the side's friction points, I guess. All right, but we would be recuperating our morale, our cards. We'd get a morale point, which is one of the few things that we're going to get out of a turn, is that we can attack with the Imperial Guard. And we get to remove half our friction points at the top of the turn, in addition to perhaps taking another shot at that, or drawing another card to get a richer hand. So we have a number of different options there that could help us. Well, like I said, it's tempting. There's another tempting factor, which is taking my reinforcement here, the Africa unit. Let me think about it for a little bit and consult some rules, obviously. One thing, obviously this is a first playthrough, right? So don't expect me to make clever decisions necessarily. I'll explain what I'm trying to do, but it's from a very uninformed type of position. Someday or another, sharks will, you know, come for a game like this, which I think can be studied quite a bit. I think people will set it up and play it 2 or 3 times in a row, probably. It's a fairly short-looking game. Maybe not that many times, but they may play a number of times to try to, hey, you beat me this time, let's have another go, you know, or let's switch sides, I want to try this. That kind of idea that I've seen in, you know, these. This is definitely designed more for the competitive player, but I still like looking at even lighter games for their historical aspect and the story that they tell. It gives me, you know, a shorter turnaround on getting at least the broad strokes of the history. I think I'm going to go for the R&R phase, because I don't want to attack this hex anyhow, which is what it would mean to try to take this important piece of my line. I don't have a lot of strength on the board, especially after this sucker's been pulled off. So, let's see what we're going to do. We follow the operations phase. We don't draw cards. We're allowed to discard and then fill our hand to any level we will on. So this is going to give me the ability to give the Germans some friction points. And then reconceal my French units. Well, that's not too big a deal. And I may want to use this turn. This mobilization doesn't look terribly valuable. The Magnificent Positions does, though. I really like that for 2 extra combat points. So I'm going to hold on to these 2 cards and just draw another card. Gambetta's Balloon Ride. If I'm the Second Empire, I am. I can pay 2 for a morale. It would be cheaper later. This is not a terribly pleasant card from my point of view. At this point, because it gets removed from play. I think, however I play it, or maybe that's only under mobilization. I think it's only under mobilization, only under this mobilization effect that takes effect. So I don't think I particularly want this card. I don't think I particularly want to use this card for trading in for a morale at this point in the game. So let's keep going. We get a morale point. Yay. And then I can remove half my friction points. Okay. Now I go on to mobilization. I can take any reinforcements I like, and I'm allowed to play cards to get reinforcements. Well, I'm going to play the Balloon Raid. Again, reading that the remove this card from play only happens if I use the special effect here. To grab a friction point, and that gets me a triangle. So I'm going to bring this unit into play. He gets brought into play. I looked up reinforcements, but I'm not sure replacements are the same. Hold on. That's not sufficient. It's per strength point or something. Yeah, it's per strength point. Shit. That's not going to help me. No way I'm going to produce enough to rebuild that unit. So I will not do that. Instead, I'm going to just take the Africa unit, which comes in here. What I didn't look up is where the replacements come now. They return as reinforcements. Okay. So I'm going to place this sucker here, and I'm planning on railing him into place. I'm going to have some trouble getting where I want to go, though. So that's my reinforcement, my... Jeez. I didn't want to do this necessarily, but okay. I'm thinking the rest in reorganization, but it's too late because I've drawn a card. Is not really what I want to do, because I can't afford that withdraw-only movement, right? Well, maybe I can. There's this huge gap here that's hurting me. This is my nearest supply, or this is a supply source that's kind of in the direction. This is another one that's kind of in the direction. So as long as I'm falling this way, I'm getting closer to some of my supply sources. That's how I read it. Okay, I'm getting closer to Paris, which is legitimate. So during movement, I've got 4 movement points here. 2, and that gives me something of a protection. Do I want to just abandon Strasbourg? Oh, these guys are all upside down now because of the thing. Do I want to abandon Strasbourg here? Yeah. I'm sorry, this was only one movement point into the rough, but I had to stop. Here I'll go 1, 2, 3, and fall back to here. These guys have a problem. To get to a supply source, or towards a supply source, I don't care which one, they're going to be falling at best in this direction. Now I have strategic movement that I can use here. If I can find it. Road movement gives me an extra movement point. If I follow the railroads, they count as roads. But that's not the strategic movement. Strategic movement is somewhere. Oh, one thing I wanted to talk about in the rules, there's a no takebacks. Whatever movement you do, kind of, you're not allowed to undo. Now, I'm always kind of iffy on those kind of rules to begin with. The goal for that is to represent failures in command during this campaign. Both sides had their issues. But with a learning game, those failures are going to be magnified tremendously. So I'm probably going to kind of neglect that or not play it as heavily. Also, even with a real game, you know, if you're playing, it means maybe a higher overhead because you want to think everything through. Therefore, you've got to be able to hold a lot more information in your head. If you're AP prone like I am, you will hold all that information in an attempt to process everything, and it's going to maybe, you know, quintuple the length of your turns compared to if you were allowed to move things back. Then again, it might actually end up giving you a, well, the hell with this, I'm just going to play and move pieces around. All depends. Now, but if you don't have the rules completely internalized, I don't think that it's a reasonable option necessarily. We'll see. I tend to be pretty capable of causing problems. This rule book is like the old, what had these? TSR's games had them, where it's got kind of a hard cover, and I had to break the binding to be able to flatten it at all, but you can see it's still not holding up well to that. Okay. Strategic movement has to be somewhere. Is there some kind of... Yeah, all I get here... Oh no, it's an optional rule, that's why. Okay, so it says 9. Well, that's not 9. Okay, let's keep looking. What do these numbers mean? I'm assuming they're the page number, and it looks to me like it was intended to have a larger page. I don't know what those numbers are meant to be. I don't know, it's on page 17. I see nothing on here that relates to 9. So it looks to me like the index didn't keep up with the presentation at all, which makes it almost useless. The table of contents. Okay. So each friendly movement phase, you can move one friendly supplied unit by strategic movement in lieu of something else. And this will be rail movement 10 hexes, but I have to worry. Each of those hexes still has to follow the retreat rules. Where do I want to pull this unit, if that's the case? Well, honestly, I don't see any terrible advantage to pulling back to Paris. I'm not going to see the Germans there anytime soon. So I'm going to just stay where I am. In fact, I'm not going to bring them in. So I can bring them in next turn and not there's no cost to bringing them in, but there's a potential decision that I might not want to bring them in if the German deck gets reshuffled for some reason. I still haven't looked up when reshuffling is going to happen. All right, so I've got kind of a connection here. The Germans are allowed to do a reaction still. And this might be appealing. Now, there's a fortress here. What about here? Well, I can only move one hex, so there's not a whole lot I can do with a reaction. Spending a card for a reaction doesn't seem terribly valuable to me. But maybe it is, just because I can get rid of one of these cards. So, for example, this, if I discard for a reaction, I can move any of my units, well, and as long as they move into an enemy zone of control, which isn't going to happen. I could just discard 2 of my cards. Do I have cards that I don't particularly think I want to play next turn? You know. Got this combat card that I probably do want to, that I may want to play. March to the Guns looks to me as more of a defensive card, but it could be terribly valuable. How about Manteuffel? That could give me some significant kind of force march type capability. Is that important? 2, 4, maybe. Not a lot of units have the kind of movement that I want. On the other hand, I can push forward a hex right now, right? I'll hold off on playing a card for reaction here. Obviously no combat phase, and then we go to the administrative phase, and the French can either get a card, and we may have one we don't terribly like, or they could get rid of, no, they didn't pick one up. Nothing's fallen, so we don't have any morale changes there. And then we can spawn a dummy. All right. I think I'm going to draw a card as my option. Garde Mobile. Lots of nice flavor text here to explain the thing. Kind of started reading that with the, geez, that's interesting, but, you know, I'm on video here, I shouldn't just be silent reading the card. I can get a free reinforcement for a friction point. That's pretty cool, and that's these a reserve unit made up of people who've bought exemptions. I think that's kind of cool. I'm going to discard the balloon raid, which is why I took the draw, because I figured I'd get something better than that. And in terms of other effects, well, other than getting rid of that morale bonus from the balloons, this is a worse mobilization card than this. So either way, I've got something cool there. And now, well, we look at this, we look at the French administrative phase, and we see whether there's anything happening there, and there isn't. And then we get to hide our units and throw a dummy on the map. And we're always going to take the dummy if we can. I don't know if we've got a space we're allowed to place it. I think it's got to be placed with a unit that currently exists. Let's see. Unfortunately, the numbers are integrated from the specific rules into the standard rules for the system. That's not what I'm used to. It may end up making sense in the long run to me, but it means that I have trouble, especially given that the index, the table of contents doesn't match the page numbers with what we've got here. So how do I spawn a dummy? It's got to be with another unit. So I'm not going to be allowed to do that, or I'll be overstacked. Okay. So I think that is the end of the first turn here. We got some reinforcements coming in the second turn. And yes, I took my time. I'm going to load this one up just to give you an idea of sort of the basic mechanics of the system. And then, I don't like that word. I like mechanisms better, but so many people use it, it's like theme. So many people use it that it's hard not to say it when you keep reading it. But anyway, I hope it shows you some of the basic core system. And we'll continue with the playthrough, probably in some detail for another turn or two, and then we'll kind of step back and start showing just results, I think. I'm not sure. All right.